This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. Today on Uncommonly Remarkable, I'm joined by Troy Laing, founder of Culture OC and a pioneer in biohacking and holistic wellness. Troy shares his powerful journey from childhood trauma and addiction to building a life around cellular health and performance. We dive into the science and practice of float therapy, breathwork, cold plunges, infrared saunas, and hyperbaric oxygen chambers, and explore how these tools can not only extend your life, but make it healthier, stronger, and more vibrant. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please welcome Troy to the show. Troy, welcome to the show, man. It's great to see you. We've connected a little bit back and forth via email and text, and so it's great to have you on the show. I'm really excited about all the discussion we're going to have today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the show as a guest. Very honored to be here, and look forward to our conversation and talking a bit more about what we do and how we can incorporate that into the world of health and wellness.
Man, that part is really exciting. We've spent a lot of time in various degrees of wellness and health and just kind of thinking about how we become better. We've talked about traditional Chinese medicine. We've talked about functional medicine. We've talked about nutrition, mental health, exercise. And so combining all these things together, I think people are getting a sense of what they can do to become the better versions of themselves. And so having you on and kind of talking about culture, I think is going to be really, really integral to that. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do today?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Australia. I actually immigrated out here about 5 years ago. My wife's American. And I've been in the space of biohacking in regards to optimizing human performance on a cellular level through different ways of using technology to increase our health and optimize our performance. So Culture, the business we started a couple of years ago, is all around using non-invasive technologies, and that incorporates things like LED light stimulation, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, infrared sauna, cold plunge, and going into the spiritual aspect of meditation and breath work. And what we're really trying to encompass here, like you mentioned at the start of the podcast, there's multiple different avenues of where we're looking at our health from a holistic point of view. You have nutrition, you have training, and all these different aspects. And we want to look at the body as a full operating system. So we're not looking at like one part of life or lifestyle. We're looking at every part to bring that together as one fully operating vehicle to get the best optimization out of our body.
That sounds amazing. And you said a couple of things that I think we should kind of pull out. One of them is you used the term biohacking, which I think does get thrown around a lot. In your mind, how do you think about biohacking and what does it really mean for someone who's really starting to think about how they approach life?
So for me, and what I term the word biohacking, what it means on a basic level is we are going to hack into our biology. Like a computer hacker would hack into a software on a computer system. We are trying to do the same with understanding our biology and understanding how different mechanisms of action can change our biological response. So for example, when we're using red light or LED light stimulation, we're mechanically forcing the body to have a biological response where our cells absorb that light wave frequency and convert that into ATP or energy, more collagen and elastin production. And the biological response when you're on the bed, releasing trapped nitric oxide, increasing or vasodilating, increasing blood flow and circulation. So we're using either supplements, peptides, technology to force a biological response in the body. And for me, biohacking, that term really is you taking control over your own health and wellness. So I feel like we've put too much trust and we're looking outside ourselves for education and help, where we actually have to have more responsibility, at least on a basic level of understanding our health and wellness and understanding what our body needs on a basic level. So at least even when you're looking for a good physician or doctor or someone to go to, you're equipped with the right questions and understanding of a basic, simple level. So when you do go to see someone, you know whether they're a doctor wanting to help you or a big pharma rep, which is there. I think there's like two variances.
I think that is a really important point, and it's one that I think we've tried to make over and over again on the show, is that there is a responsibility level as a person, as a patient, to have some education around the things that you are going to question, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have basic understanding or you haven't taken responsibility for the basics, it's very difficult for you to ask the right questions, understand if you're receiving the right treatment, understand your options, or make different decisions. And so having that responsibility is key. It's paramount.
Yeah.
And, I think it also goes to speak around the differences between kind of making it through day to day in expected norms and having a very good or long health span.
Yeah.
And those two things are different, right? Like people have a lifespan and lifespans have gotten longer. We've got great science, right? But what does it look like from a health span perspective? And I think that's where the biohacking really comes in.
Yeah, and we may be living longer, but are we living longer in a healthy way, or are we just living longer through extension of life, but dealing and managing, chronic health issues, which is unfortunately the latter. And
Hmm.
my perspective on life, I have a set goal that I want to live to well into my centurion years. So I know that even based on telomere lengthening with giving all the right inputs, we can easily live to 120 around that age, but we have to give ourselves the right input and right mechanisms of action, whether that's nutrition, physical movement, but with technologies like red
Hmm.
light, hyperbaric, detoxing with infrared saunas, we have the ability to make sure we set up our cells and our body to have the ability to live longer and be able to live happy and healthily, not struggling with chronic health issues and disease as we age.
So the question then for me is, how did you get here? Because I think some of the things that you talk about are really maybe cutting edge for a lot of listeners, and maybe people are not familiar. But you've had a journey that kind of brought you into this space, that taught you a lot along the way. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, my early childhood started with a lot of challenges and some health issues that I had. Nothing serious, just some challenges with different things that I was in hospital for. As I said, nothing serious. But I also grew up in an environment with parents that were extremely high functioning alcoholics. So there was a lot of verbal domestic abuse and challenges. And this really shaped my subconscious conditioning in regards to how I dealt with things emotionally. As I grew through those stages into early adulthood, I I actually became I had issues with drugs and alcohol and substance abuse
Mm.
myself especially through my 20s up until I was about 31. But at the age of 15, one thing that I'd started doing was being a guy born in the 80s. I was fascinated with all the movie stars at that stage, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme. So I got into weightlifting and resistance training at a very early age. And that influence and that connection to working out was the one thing that saved my life through challenges of addictions and alcohol abuse and substance abuse. But I always had this deep connection to more biohacking optimization. So using supplements, I had done a lot with cold water therapy and detoxing through saunas. And then that from 30, I was actually in the Himalayas, trekking through the Himalayan mountain ranges, and I had this almost epiphany moment of this life changing experience where if I don't make some changes now, I'm not going to have the quality of life that I want in the future. I was single at the time. I was I was ready to meet someone and have a family and go down that path of life, but I knew I had to make significant changes for my life to evolve down that path. And that's what led me into a 10-year process of diving deep more into the side of biohacking and technologies, where I started to learn a lot more about. Where I started was more with childhood psychology, early brain development. That was to understand why I was the way I was, the trauma and things that were affecting me, and how to, recondition my subconscious conditioning to the environments that I grew up in and the things I was subjected to. And then from that, I just became fascinated with the human body, biology, how our cells communicate and how they operate. And that led me down into hyperbaric oxygen medicine, LED light stimulation therapy, infrared saunas, pulse electromagnetic frequency. And it just kept evolving into all these technologies and ways that we can shift and change our body to really get better performance, longer longevity, and to help with recovery when we're going through challenges.
Wow. And then as you kind of went through the personal journey of discovery and learning, where was the inflection point where you decided that you needed to share this with others and start developing culture as a place that people could actually have access to some of these things?
Yeah, so it was about 5 years after that trip to the Himalayas, where at the time I was in Australia. We have a strong culture with what's called fly in, fly out work because of the mining industry.
Mm,
So my background was in instrumentation, electrical work, and I also mixed that with personal training. I was a sports massage therapist. So I worked in a few different fields, one connected to health and wellness, and one connected to electrical instrumentation work where you're monitoring process plants. And when I started learning more about biohacking and technology, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to be able to open up a facility that incorporated everything in regards to physical movement and activity, technologies, and looking at the body as a whole. Because with my trade and background, I had a really mechanical way of looking at things, but I looked at the body as a mechanical operation of different parts, like I would at a water processing plant, where you have meters and everything, talking to computers and measuring what's working, what's not, what needs to be added in. And that's where I was like, I want to bring my knowledge and understanding of the science of technology to the practical physical world of how the body operates, and have that in one place as a place for people to be able to heal their body, to optimize performance for athletes, and ideally have a space for recovery when going through challenges.
I mean, I think it sounds amazing the way that you've kind of the building blocks, right? So, I love that the personal experience really, you didn't know it at the time, but was really setting a foundation. Then learning about child development, child psychology, I think is really, really interesting because there's a lot of things that we carry with us from childhood, knowingly or unknowingly, that influence the way we think about things and the things that we do throughout life. And so I think a lot of people they miss that piece. And so there's a lot of subconscious things that go into even habit forming or changing your mind about the way you do things or changing your mindset. And so having some access to that had to be really, really cool for you because it kind of let you understand and move you along. When it comes to working with clients or people coming into the clinic, how do you think about that for them holistically? Because a lot of them maybe have not had access or really even thought about that piece of their development, which may be holding them back from getting to where they want to go.
Yeah, and that's a very important piece. A lot of people don't understand how powerful our brain is in regards to even our thoughts. Our thoughts become things, and I tell people that our psychology is our biology. Even coming into a multi-million-dollar facility where they have all the best equipment, if you don't have the right thought process in regards to your ability to heal your body, which all starts with your thoughts and your brainwave activity, then your brain will basically not allow your body to heal as best it can with the external inputs that we can give through technology and different treatments. So when we're profiling people going through a wellness evaluation, we are looking at more than just the symptoms they present with. We're looking at their lifestyle as a whole so that we can direct them in the right direction for healing. And that comes down to everything. So we're questioning them about their environments, the people they spend their time with, their media consumption, everything down to how much sleep they have, water consumption, nutrition. So we're looking at everything as a lifestyle whole. And then through that, culture has been built on a strong community. So we really focus on that community connection. So all our clients really, at the end of the day, becoming somewhat close friends of the culture family. And that way, I've found through my own journey that some of my strongest abilities to change who I was in life was being in communities where I was able to share my story and hear the stories of other people or older men or other people in the community that had been through similar life circumstances, because that energetic transfer of being able to share a story with someone makes you see and understand that you're not the only person going through something. Maybe there are other things to look into and understand through your early development and childhood that you might not fully understand, that's causing some sabotage in your life or challenges that come up. And it's a good way to bring community closer so that you can understand that there are other avenues and other aspects to look at to understand your full development. But I think what you touched on in regards to the early childhood psychology and brain development, when you do have a basic understanding of that, it gives you the tools you need to be able to make different choices. There are ways to, through neuroplasticity, to recreate neural pathways. And what you're doing there is dealing with trauma and emotions so that you can start to create new habits, new disciplines, and that way it's going to change the trajectory of your future instead of being, held up in the past.
Yeah, so there are a couple things. Then the first, and we'll put this one kind of, I'll call it the parking lot, because I do want to talk a little bit about the coordination of care, like what it's like to work with other professionals, with people who are, say, receiving treatment for other things elsewhere. But when it comes to the neuroplasticity part, I think that's one of the things that's really, really interesting to think about, because there are things that create or facilitate neuroplasticity, and if you're facilitating it, then you have to have the right inputs, or at least the right awareness to take advantage of that and make something new,
Yep.
right? And so I think it's often that people want to make something new, but they are having a very difficult time getting neuroplasticity. And so it's very difficult to undo whatever it is they're trying to undo, habits, depression, etc. Versus there are people who have neuroplasticity from whatever source. It's hypnosis, maybe it's deprivation. Like maybe they're taking a medication that's allowing for this to happen, and then there's the other pieces that get you to have the change that you're looking for. And kind of reading through a little bit about some of the treatments or protocols that you offer, I think there are a couple things in particular, including the float that really can open up neuroplasticity. So maybe we should talk a little bit about some of the treatments that are available, because some of them may be new to listeners who've never had or haven't had that exposure.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned float therapy, and the reason I actually have float therapy here is during my journey and change when I had that moment in the Himalayas and I wanted to make a change and shift. One of the first therapies that I actually did was a float therapy through a float center where I lived at the time, and I was working with a energy healer, counselor, in conversation and counseling, talking about things. She was created a safe space for me to be able to dive a bit deeper into understanding some of the aspects of childhood and growing up and how that could affect me. And I was doing that in combination with float therapy, which is where I had some of my biggest releases of trauma and understanding of the past. So for listeners not understanding what float therapy is, it's also known as a sensory deprivation tank. And this is a pod that is filled with body temperature water that's has high levels of the specific gravity is very high because it's filled with magnesium and Epsom salts. So when you get into the pod, which almost looks like that, the pod I have looks like the original Tesla S model, the shape of it, where the pod opens up, and when you get into the pod, you actually lay down flat. And because of the specific gravity in the water, like the Dead Sea in Europe, you're actually suspended, and it's almost like being suspended in gravity, where you're floating around the pod. But with the sensory deprivation, the pod does close, the lights go out, and you go into full darkness. So you're basically disconnecting from all outside sensory connections. And this is where you can go into really deep meditative state. Now, I have had two experiences being in a pod. If you're going into a pod and you have the right frame of mind where you're settled and you don't have too much thought going in, most people will go into an extremely deep meditative state where you're between sleep state, that you're in a theta and delta state where you're in that parasympathetic state of recovery and repair, and also in deep meditative process into that delta or theta brain wavelength. But if you are, I've had other times where I've had so much going on mentally that I can't relax and disconnect. And that 60 minutes goes from where you're relaxed and it feels like you're in there for 10 minutes to where you feel like you're in there for 3 hours and you can't wait for it to end. So there is a way, there is a way to really put yourself in the right brainwave state. You want to be in that parasympathetic state where your body's relaxed, because once you go in there, you do go on this journey through deep meditation. And I would do breathwork practices in there to take me even deeper at the earlier beginnings of the float session, so that when I would go through these deep meditative states, you're actually starting to see things a lot clearer, almost similar to people that what they report to having when they do plant medicine ceremonies or use psychedelics to manage trauma.
As you were describing the tank, you mentioned movies earlier, and the action heroes of the 80s and 90s, but Minority Report, the twins and the third were floating in that, which is very similar to what you described, right? Like they were kind of in the in between state, and that's what I think about when I think about those tanks.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to explain it. That's really that's exactly what it's like.
Well, but you mentioned breath work, and I think breath work is one of those things. I actually just learned a lot about breath work from a guest a few weeks ago. And there is a remarkable amount of mental clarity that can come from understanding breathing and how integral it is to the way the body functions. And so if you're thinking about going into this tank, and maybe your day to day, even if you're not thinking about going into float therapy, breath work can be a really good way to actually position yourself to be ready to change thought patterns or behave differently based on being able to calm your mind. Certainly can help with sleeping and then awareness after you wake up, etc.
Yeah, so through the float therapy, I actually met a community in Perth in Australia where I was living at the time, that when you're ready to open your eyes and your heart in life, things will present themselves to take you on a journey. So from the float center and the people that work there, they were part of a community that met every morning for cold water dips at the beach. So we lived on the coast where I live. And that community was built on a free community basis through the creator, Paul, who became a good friend of mine. And they were very intricate with teaching breathwork practices around emotional fight or flight control with cold water immersion. So my biggest significant change in life was actually learning breathwork and control emotional fight or flight control techniques through breathwork for cold water immersion, or people would know it as cold plunging or ice baths. So our culture, we actually have created a practice where we teach people the foundational aspects of breath work in regards to controlling fight or flight response. And we do that with cold plunging because, one, we can use our breath to control our nervous system response, which is very important. And with controlled breath work, when you go into a state of controlled shock, which is basically what's happening when you go into a cold plunge, you're utilizing your breath to slow your heart rate down. And when you slow your heart rate down, you actually slow the release of fight or flight chemicals, which gives you control over your fight or flight response in that environment. So I personally, breath work is something that I do nearly every morning. I think it's one of the best things you can do to really calm your nervous system and put you in a really strengthened, focused state before you start your day. And also with that, making sure that I have a rule that I set for myself that for the first hour of the day, once I wake up, that I do not open my phone to anything at all. No emails, no social media, no crypto market trading, like whatever I'm into, like because the last thing you want to do is put yourself in a high state of anxiety and stress. And no matter whether your news feed is all wonderful or the texts you get are all great, you're still like bringing your brain on and switched on to a heightened state. And that's the first hour when you wake up is where you want to basically calmly bring yourself online through what I believe the best practices is some short form of gratitude meditation and breath work. Because when you do that, it aligns your nervous system and and optimizes bringing your cellular function online to then manage other things that will come up through the day, especially if you have a high stress state of mind with what you do for work or family life, having kids. So you really do need to create that pocket of time early in the day to make sure that you're setting yourself up for the rest of the day and the challenges that may arise.
It's one of those things where you may not believe that it makes a difference unless you have some physical way of measuring it. What's interesting is I wear a Whoop, and I wear it continuously,
Yeah.
and it has this little thing where it measures your stress moments. And I am a world champion sleeper. Always have been. It's just great. People are like, how is this possible? I don't know. It's just the way it is. But if I wake up and immediately do something, even things that I find really fun to do, like solving the Wordle,
Yeah.
you can see these little spikes in stress during those periods and those types of things right after you wake up.
Yeah.
And so while I'm not good at going a whole hour, I have learned that it's best not to just immediately open your eyes and start doing things
Yeah.
on the phone, because it does set the tone for the rest of your morning, which to me are precious, right? Like I start my mornings at about 4:15 a.m. and it's the time where it's quiet and you can read and kind of think about the day ahead. And if you mess it up, then you've messed it up. And so that's a really good point.
Yeah. And that, I mean, getting up that early too, I think they term the time between 3 and 5 a.m. as the miracle hours because it is like when you get up at that time, no one is awake. There's nothing happening. And there's this sense of like peace and tranquility at that time in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. So we talked about the float therapy, and we talked then indirectly about breath work because that can help set you up for success there.
Yep.
Cold plunging. Um, but when in the cold plunge, what's the benefit of cold exposure, and why do you offer it?
Well, you have the physiological side, which has many benefits, and then you have the emotional and psychological side of things, which when we spoke earlier about neuroplasticity, for me, cold plunging can get some challenging raps by certain people that say it's damaging and can have a negative experience for people, which anything in life can. So not everyone is geared to be in a cold plunge, but we teach a practice around giving people the best opportunity to have full control over the environment, and we do that through breath work. But for me, physiologically, you have a huge reduction in inflammation. It's very anti-inflammatory, which is, for most of us, surrounded by environmental toxins and chemicals and even lifestyle habits where we generally carry some form of physical inflammation. So it's very anti-inflammatory. So that is one physiological aspect. When you're in a cold plunge, like we have a time frame that we want to get to have the results of cold shock, and you have cold shock protein release. So if your body and your immune system is not compromised, when you go into a cold plunge and you go into cold shock, and that cold shock protein is released, this helps increase your immune variability and how your immune system responds. So it's strengthening your immune system as long as you are not already compromised with it. So if you had the cold and flu and you went into a cold plunge, it's going to actually make that cold and flu a lot worse because your immune system is already compromised. But if you're rather healthy and you have a good health at the time when you're doing a cold plunge and doing it consistently, it's actually strengthening your immune system. What it helps do also is when a lot of people talk a lot to do with contrast therapy, but just cold plunging alone, when you get out of a cold plunge and your body goes through thermogenesis and it's trying to warm up and heat up your body, it burns brown adipose fat tissue. So it does help with weight loss in regards to burning fat. And then as your body thermogenically warms up, your body naturally releases dopamine, which is that euphoric chemical that makes you feel good. It gives you that sense of euphoria. And that actually is the same mechanism of action where people get addicted to things. So people actually get quite addicted to cold plunging because of the after effect of that dopamine release, which is, for me, I think is a great addiction to have because of the benefits you get from it. Now, there's some of the physiological benefits, but when we talk about cold plunging, I love it because of the neurological benefits that you get from cold plunging. I don't know anyone, and I do it almost daily, that ever wants to get in a cold plunge. Because why would you want to do that?
Why? Yeah.
But when you inherently do something that you don't want to do, like cold plunging, you start to rewire your brain through neuroplasticity of how you manage stress, how you manage confrontation, and how you manage challenges, because you're inherently doing something that your brain is telling you not to do. And not only are you doing that, when you get in and you go through that first part of shock, you're actually having to push back against your fight or flight response, because your fight or flight response is like, this is dangerous, let's get out of here. This is dangerous, let's get out of here. And for some people, they go into what feels like pain because your body is having a chemical release of a chemical to make you feel like you're in pain because it wants you to get out. And that's why we teach breath work, because your breath controls your heart rate, as I said. Your heart rate brings down that chemical release of fight or flight chemicals. And then you can actually, for me, cold plunging, it takes me about 10 seconds to have that adjustment period. And then for me, I go into a meditative state where I'm just in a certain state of mind. And I listen to, do you know who Eric Thomas is, the motivational speaker?
Mm-hmm.
He's one of my favorite motivational speakers of all time. He has a lot of I can, I will, I must type videos. Mm-hmm. So I listen to that with the intention of setting my intention for the day and setting my visual intention for the things that I'm working towards. So it becomes a deep subconscious visualization meditation practice because when you go into a cold plunge, there's one thing that does happen. You don't think about any troubles that you have in your life. They're gone. They're out the window.
Well, that is absolutely fair, right? Like, and it's interesting to me because, I mean, everything has a starting point, but cold plunging really started with athletes looking to have a high level of recovery, right? And it's kind of transitioned from just athletes to being something that an everyday person might think about in order to better themselves. And so so these benefits that you describe are really those types of things that people are seeking in order to kind of take themselves to the next level.
Yeah, I just want to touch on what you shared then because it's very important. I get asked this quite a lot. You are right. We mainly saw cold plunging as something athletes were doing after a workout, which is, I mentioned it's about reducing inflammation, which is helping speed up recovery. But now that it's such a well-known therapy and a lot of people are doing it, now we have a lot of science around that. One of the physiological benefits, and it does come around how you use cold plunging, is specifically in men with hormone regulation and the increased natural testosterone production. But to do that, it's very important in regards to how you utilize cold plunging. So if you're wanting more stamina, more performance, more hormone regulation, you want to actually cold plunge prior or before to weight training or resistance training. And you actually don't want to be cold plunging directly after doing any heavy resistance training or muscle building type training, because it
Mm.
actually decreases the muscle tissue's development. So, and these are all science-backed clinical studies now that we understand the benefits of cold plunging before and after. So mainly with now you see recovery after with cold plunging that you would do if you'd done a marathon or more endurance or aerobic type activity, because you're not relying on muscle development. But if you are training weight resistance training and you're looking to stimulate muscle growth, you want to actually be cold plunging prior to your workouts and definitely not directly after. If you are cold plunging after workouts, you do want to have around a 4 hour window so that it doesn't affect the stimulation of muscle growth.
Man, that's incredible advice, and that's not something you get often, right? Like, and if people are kind of thinking about, oh, I because there's so many now commercial cold plunge devices you can bring to your house, and people may be out looking to get these things and set up their own tank, but understanding how to use them properly to get the result that you're looking for is really, really important.
Yeah, and I'll share one quick case study story. So I had a client who found us, was interested in cold plunging. He came here, I taught him our breathwork practices, and he got right into it, loved it. And at the time, him and his wife were trying to have children. So they're having some, just challenges. So that he was doing all his fertility testing, and his testosterone levels were extremely low. They were under 400. And so I told him about the way of cold plunging to increase natural testosterone production. So he cold plunged every day, 5 days a week before he would go to the gym, before he went to work. And after 3 months, he went back and had his blood work done. And his doctor almost fell off his chair. He's like, "What have you been doing? Your T levels are through the roof." And he just told him what he'd been doing. And the doctor couldn't believe like how much his natural testosterone levels had gone up. It was without any influence of external influence such as therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, because obviously that affects your fertility. And
Right.
so it does work. I've had case studies in person in my facility. It's not just clinical studies and trials that I've read. I've actually used this for men to increase their natural testosterone production.
How crazy. That's awesome. And so let's see, there was a couple of other things though that I saw from a therapy perspective that I maybe wanted clarification on from you. One of them was saunas,
Yep.
because I think you have red light saunas, or red light sauna therapy.
So we have infrared saunas.
Oh, that's it. That's right. Infrared. And with what is the difference between the infrared and traditional heat, and why is the infrared better?
So with a traditional sauna, like a steam room or hot rock room, you're being heated up from the outside. So you're using external heat to heat the body up. And a lot of people don't know that when we sweat, that is actually our fight or flight response to try and cool our body down, because our body's getting hot. So it's releasing fluid from the body to try and cool our body down. Now, with an infrared sauna, you're in a sauna that's emitting infrared wavelengths of light. Now, with infrared wavelengths of light that do not have any color spectrum, so unlike red light that is clearly red or blue light that is clearly blue, infrared has no wavelength, no color spectrum to it, so you can't see it. But when you're in an infrared sauna, those light wavelengths are hitting the tissue, penetrating the tissue, and getting down to a deeper layer. So it's almost heating the tissue up, or like being in an oven almost for a human body, where it's heating you up more from the inside out. And in a sauna, well, ideally and there is a huge amount of clinical studies and trials over 30, 40 years, especially from some of the European countries where they use sauna traditionally on a regular basis, where if you're saunaing up to 4 or more times a week, seeing up to a 40, 50, 60% decrease in all-cause mortality, such as cardiovascular disease, heart disease. And the reason being is that our body is like a sponge. So our skin, our outside mechanism of protection, is like a sponge. So it's absorbing our environment, and that means we're absorbing air pollution. Our bathing water generally is dosed with different chemicals. So everything, our cleaning products, which is fuming off different chemicals, we're absorbing all that. So any form of sauna, whether it's infrared, steam rooms, hot rock rooms, are all about detoxing our body through our sweat glands. But the difference between that and an infrared sauna is an infrared sauna is using light wavelengths that's getting down into a deeper layer in the tissue. Therefore, you're producing more of a sweat response from a deeper layer in the tissue, forcing more environmental chemicals and toxins out of the body. From a safety and a maintenance point of view, infrared saunas are what we call dry saunas because there's no moisture used to heat up the sauna, and they're much better in regards to maintenance regarding mold. A lot of people are exposed to mold poisoning these days. So with a dry sauna, infrared sauna, you don't get any buildup of mold as long as you're keeping it in an actual area that's dry and keeps the environment dry. And then you don't get that buildup of mold, which you can if you don't have good maintenance protocols on a sauna that uses steam or hot rocks where you have a lot of moisture in the air.
That's pretty amazing. And when I was kind of thumbing through and looking at what was offered, we often see dry saunas with rock heat versus the saunas with infrared.
Yeah.
And kind of thinking through the differences between the two and what the benefits might be for the infrared, this all makes really good sense to me. So of the things that we've talked about so far, we haven't talked about the oxygen chamber, and so I think that's one of your favorites. And so, why is it one of the things that I think I've heard you say? If you could do one, this is the one you do. Why is it, and what does it really do for you?
So, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is where you're pressurizing a chamber. You're inside a physical chamber. Now, they come in, you can get multi-place chambers or single-place chambers, and they're all different shapes and sizes. But think of it basically being in a mini submarine, so a cylinder tube that is being. Now, the thing with hyperbaric medicine is you have what is termed as a hard shell chamber or a soft shell chamber. A hard shell chamber means the outside makeup of the chamber is hard, and the reason for that is being able to build pressure to a higher pressure range. A soft shell chamber will look more like a canvas bag that sort of you get inside of and zip up, and that is, because it's obviously a canvas bag, it can't be pressurized to much higher pressure ranges. Now, what is happening in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber is you're building pressure around the body, and our chamber is pressurized with normal air. So the air we actually breathe in normally, like we are now, only 21% of that is actually oxygen that our body utilizes for us to be able to breathe. But oxygen is very important for cellular energy activation or ATP production. So think of energy. Think of oxygen as energy, and everything that we consume, whether it be food, is turned into energy. Oxygen is turned into energy. So we're basically giving ourselves an input for more energy production within our body and our cells. And we are made up of trillions of cells, but that does not mean all the cells are the same. We have skin cells. We have our cells our organs are made up of different cell tissue. Our muscles are made up of different cell tissue. But how those cells communicate is vastly determined by how much energy they can produce. And all your cells are communicating and operating together in unison. That's why we want to look at the body as one cellular system made up of different cells. But the amount of energy or ATP production they can produce helps with everything from athletic performance to speeding up recovery from injury or surgery to optimizing anti-aging benefits, better quality of skin, slowing the aging process down. So what happens is that mechanism of action is when you're in a chamber being pressurized, we have an oxygen concentrator that you're breathing in 95 to 100% oxygen. Now, as you breathe in these high levels of oxygen, that is being saturated into your blood plasma. So our blood is made up of blood plasma, which is the liquid portion of our blood, which is like our network system that's moving nutrients around the body. So our red blood cells and the nutrients we get for our food. But that plasma does not hold a high level of oxygen concentration until you go into the chamber where you have the laws of Boyle's and Dalton's gas, where a gas becomes liquefied and becomes saturated into that liquid, which is your blood plasma. And then under pressure, because you're under pressure, that blood plasma is then being forced into the tissue. So what you're needing, if your body has an inflammatory response, so you have injury, or you've had a concussion and brain damage, what happens is we need, the area is hypoxic, means it's lacking oxygen to the area. So under pressure, now we have oxygen-rich blood plasma, and under pressure, that's being forced into the tissue, which is then regenerating the tissue and speeding up the recovery process. Now, the beautiful thing with hyperbaric, and we earlier spoke about our brain and how powerful it is that our brain is what is sending and receiving signals for healing the body. Now, when you give it the right inputs and maximize things that it's lacking, such as oxygen, it will start to recreate new vascular pathways if there is a lack of blood flow to the area. So now your brain sees damage to an area, but it can't get the blood flow that it wants to. So when you're using the hyperbaric on a regular basis, it starts to reformate and recalculate and create new vascular blood pathways to feed oxygen-rich blood to the tissue so that it can regenerate it and bring it back to life the way it was. Outside of that, you actually get more stem cell mobilization from the bone marrow. So our stem cells are mobilized from our bone marrow, which after the age of 30, that starts to decrease the amount of stem cells we recreate. But with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, it starts to increase the amount of stem cells mobilized from your bone marrow. And the beauty of that is stem cells are the cells that can replicate other cells in the body that we're deficient in, which is why we're having so much progress with regeneration of tissue, regeneration of even bone, or injury management through stem cell injections and stem cell therapies.
So this is a great this is a fantastic therapy based on the science behind it, and it really brings me then to the parking lot, because there are people who are probably seeing multiple different types of physicians for whatever their ailment might be. How do you then coordinate your protocols with things that they may be doing in traditional medicine, or maybe they're seeing a functional physician, so that everybody's on the same page and really singing from a similar song sheet?
Well, it's very important. I'm actually fortunate enough to manage and help a few clients who are going through cancer diagnosis and through chemotherapy. If I have someone with a serious chronic health issue, my first port of call is making sure that they're communicating and opening up a pathway of communication with their treating physician, because that I'm not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be a doctor. I want to and always go above and beyond to work with treating physicians. What I do share with people is my science, my education, my understanding of therapies and how they benefit certain things, and case studies of people that I've worked with where this has been extremely beneficial. So I give people the information that they can utilize to, one, do their own research, one, to be able to connect with their treating physician, to also get the okay that what I might not know or understand about their condition, that this won't affect that. But I will be honest and say that in this country, there are physicians and doctors that are not progressive in regards to understanding treatments. And if they don't understand it, they will actually tell client misinformation around therapies. And I'll give an example of that. I have a lady who's now been with us over a year, who was given 1 week to maybe 1 month to live because she has a rare form of lymphoma bone cancer. And because of that diagnosis, when you're given a really short time to live, you either give up or you look for other alternatives to live longer. And she found us and was doing her own research about hyperbaric oxygen therapy and different treatments. And when she came to me, She told me that her oncologist informed her that she should not do hyperbaric because it could make the cancer more aggressive. Now, there is no studies or science or information that says that that is correct, and it actually promotes the complete opposite of what high levels of oxygen does to a cancer cell. Cancer cells are stimulated and grow because they survive on glycogen and a lack of oxygen. They're in a hypoxic environment. So oxygen acts as an antimicrobial and helps to kill off cancer cells or slow the growth of cancer cells. And that, in conjunction with other therapies and different cancer treatments, is what we utilize to help the body manage things like chemotherapy and chemo medicines, because your body is being destroyed as a whole while trying to fight and destroy the cancer. So when we're using oxygen, we're actually trying to regenerate the body, not the cancer, because the cancer will be slowed or does not survive well in an environment that has high levels of oxygen. But when she came to us, she couldn't go through chemotherapy anymore because her body was so depleted. And she spent 3 months doing my protocol using combined treatments, because I do combined therapy such as PMF, light stimulation, and hyperbaric, because they synergistically boost the effects of each other. After 3 months, she got transferred to the head doctors at UCLA, and all her test results came back optimal. So the cancer was less aggressive. It had stopped growing. She had all nodules on her lungs that had completely disappeared, and her lungs were back to 100%. And she was now healthy enough to go back to try chemotherapy to target the cancer itself, where she was so depleted that they couldn't continue. And through our treatments, we regenerated her body. Now, that for me is a beautiful story because we still have her. She's still going through it. But what I've now seen is that her body, after going through chemo again, isn't responding well to the chemotherapy, and once again making her more sick. So now she's at a critical point where she has to look for alternatives, but we now have a framework of knowing that for 3 months you weren't doing any medicines or meds or chemotherapy, and all your test results came back with positive optimal levels. So now I'm trying to work through having clients doing more biomarker testing so that I can not just have case studies of people's verbal, sharing of their story. So now we can actually track and see people's physiological response and biological response to treatments. So we can start to create more case studies around using non-invasive treatments to help heal the body. And that's incorporating, it's not just, let's do some hyperbaric and some red light. It's also looking at every variable, your diet, adding in certain medications that don't have negative effects on the body, such as ivermectin and febendazole, and some things that they're using for cancer treatments that are more functional integrative doctors that are on the cusp of doing things alternatively to chemo and cancer treatments. So now we're trying to focus more on that so we can get a lot more data and information that help people be able to manage these sorts of chronic health issues.
And that's an amazing story, to go from weeks to a year later, still being able to be here and be thinking about alternatives.
Yeah.
If people are interested in learning more about any of the therapies or making decisions about how they want to dive into their lives, how do they learn more about you, culture, and start to get more information?
Yeah, so I do have a YouTube channel where we share a lot of information, which is Culture OC. So that's just stands for Orange County, which is where we're based. So Culture OC, just typing that in, you're going to find my channel on YouTube. You'll find us on Instagram. We do a lot of educational stuff on our Instagram page. That's going to be the best place. But my advice, I've spent a big period of my life diving deep into the science and understanding and education of what I do now and bringing this together to help people. But when we spoke about being self-sustaining in regards to understanding your health and wellness, that's not me saying that you should use Google or Grok or AI and start diagnosing yourself. We have a lot of amazing doctors and physicians out there who are studied in Western practice, but bring in Eastern philosophies and understand the progressive growth of technology. So they look at us as a whole operating system, and are not just trying to prescribe you a pill. So even though because I'm not a doctor, I'm not here to diagnose people. I'm here to help people, and help manage certain symptoms and chronic health issues through the art of biohacking and understanding basic principles of how your body can respond, whilst working closely with physicians and good doctors who understand the deeper understanding of biology and how the human body processes different treatments. So I think it's very important, like we touched on earlier, yes, have self-education, but don't start to self-diagnose. You're supposed to be equipping yourself with the right questions, right understanding. So then not only can you find a good treating physician, the questions you ask will be able to weed out the ones that, as I said earlier, are good doctors who are wanting to help you because they're looking for root cause and looking for where it's coming from, rather than someone says, oh, you present with these symptoms, take this pill, it's going to save your life. That is a big pharma rep versus a doctor that says, okay, what does your sleep look like? Are you physically training? Do you do any exercise? We want to start simple and back to the basics before we start popping pills and cutting into people.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And that's really been the theme of the way we've talked about it here most often on the show. And I think the listeners really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
Troy, I have to thank you. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I think I've learned so many little things now that I can start to put together and kind of grow my knowledge around this. And so I will link Culture OC in the episode, so if people are moving about, they're driving or listening, they'll be able to click on it and get more information. But I love the advice that you give, because it helps for people who may not be in Southern California or may not get to fly in, fly out as people have done before. So thank you again so much for spending part of your day with us.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really do appreciate, one, you having me on as a guest, but also what you're doing, because you creating a platform for multiple different people in different aspects of health and wellness to be able to share information to your listeners is one of the biggest things we need to shift the current state of we call the healthcare, but the sick care system here in the United States. And the only way that's going to happen is with people like yourself creating channels that we have where we can actually consume information, find out different ways of healing our body and living and lifestyle practices. So I really appreciate it, and thank you for the work you're doing and having people like myself on.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I actually like Southern California quite a bit. So the next time I'm there, I'm going to try to pop in and say hello.
Oh, I'd love for that. I'd love for you to come and check out the space.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show, because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.